Yes. Hello, everyone. Well, to those who do not know me, I am Joan Borch-Marx from the University of Malta. Merhaba in Maltese. That's the word for welcome. Welcome to all of you to the GIREP Malta Webinar 2021. This is entitled Physics Teacher Education, What Matters? Now, I was thinking about this, what matters? And I was asking, how can teachers of physics be trained such that their quality of education, the quality of education they receive, will be instilled on others? I feel that teachers are good teachers when they are capable of producing good learners, lifelong learners. During this meeting, we shall share results from research work that has been conducted by most of you. And hopefully we will highlight good practices in teaching of physics, and also practices which are not so good, because even from that, we learn something and we grow. The aim, after all, is to try and improve students' experiences, both in schools and at universities. As a local organizing committee, we have been working very hard through this last year. We wanted to make this webinar a success. Hopefully it will be that for GIREP members and also for non-members. There was a lot of coordination between this local organizing committee and also the GIREP board. The GIREP board members, the two teams were continuously supporting one another. And this obviously to make things hopefully work out well. We are happy also to see we have something like 65 at the moment with us. We are happy to see a good number of you who have joined this meeting, and we will be sharing this time together. All in all, we wish you a fruitful experience through these coming days. So that was a short introduction at my end. I now invite the GIREP President, Professor Marisa Michelini from the University to deliver her welcome speech.
Thank you so much. I am Marisa Michelini. I am happy and honored to welcome you here, despite the epidemic not yet overcome in the whole world. Many of us are now active for the remote work in which we now can contribute for our scientific and didactic activities. The GIREP decided to remain active during this period and to maintain its mission to support physics education and the new needs by means of research and cooperative work on their experience. In the past 55 years, 2,000 physics education researchers, teachers, and other specialists of 76 countries shared their common problems, studies, results, and experience in GIREP initiatives. Out of teachers scattered in faraway schools and colleges and universities, GIREPs create a community. GIREP is an international membership organization founded in 1966, open to academics, teachers, curriculum developers, and all other stakeholders with the concern to improve physics teaching and learning by means of physics education research, innovative experimentation in physics teaching and learning, innovative materials and methods, suggestion for stakeholders, and international cooperation in conference, seminars, selected paper books, GIREP initiative and activities are many. 37 international conferences in cooperation with EPS, ICPE, PTL, UNESCO. 7 GIREP seminars in Belgium, Udine, Ljubljana, Krakow, Malta. 3 world conferences in physics education, Istanbul, São Paulo, and Hanoi this year. GIREP seminar for teachers associated to the conferences. GIREP website is recently renewed by Rosario Battaglia and Claudio Fazio. Then GIREP newsletter is all-time better edited by Elish McLaughlin. GIREP country representatives taking care from that Wim Peters, 60 of different countries are participating. But one of the main value that we developed are GIREP books. We have 30 proceedings of conferences in GIREP website. And from 2015, thanking the agreement with Springer, we have selected paper books and selected paper proceedings by Institute of Physics. The pandemic crisis has shown us how open and international research are important. We are living new experiences, developing knowledge and designing the future. Teacher education based on research and experience comparison are the basic of the future perspectives. Let us take the opportunity now by looking to the future from a global perspective. And we have new responsibility and new roles to deal with. Innovation today implies a new organizational model, of knowledge and teaching. Our goals are continued education, inclusion, with the support of the technology as a new way to develop a professional teacher education able to form the new generation and the future. We are open a seminar, not a conference. In the seminar, we promote in-depth discussion, encouraging active participation from each attendee, a model of GIREP that we have experienced successfully. This second webinar on physics teacher education, what matters, is a second edition to go more in depth in the topic. Let me have the pleasure of thanking those who make this possible. First of all, I thank the Malta Local Committee, Charles Bonello, Anthony Galea, Joan Borg-Marx, assuming the responsibility to organize the 2 GIREP webinars, 2020 and 2021. To work in the last 2 years with them was a great pleasure for their attention to any detail and for their care to invent the best initiatives for the quality of the webinar. Let me thank the Malta local authorities supporting the initiative, Director of the University of Malta, Professor Vella, the Dean of the Faculty of Science, Professor Sinagra, and the Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Science, Professor Fiona Samut, here with us, the Dean of the Faculty of Education, Colin Kalia. I acknowledge in addition the cooperating bodies, and in particular EPS PED, PED, and MPTL, helping for the working group activities. Let me thank also Dagmar Soklovka and Elish McLaughlin taking care of the Malta webinar on behalf of GIREP board with me, and the whole GIREP board for the long time dedicated for this initiative with great pleasure. I want to thank the keynote speakers, Professor Andrea Xereb, Federico Corni, Susan Gatt, Stamatis Vokos, and Geshe Pospik. Last but not least, let me thank the responsibles of the working groups who accepted to do a very demanding and important work. We plan, in fact, to have a position paper for each working group. So the topics treated will become some sort of reference guidelines for the status of research and the perspective of research in that topic. I wish you fertile work in this perspective. Many thanks to participants for offering their work and contribution to the discussion on the GIREP Malta 2021 webinar. Thank you for being GIREP and have good work. Many thanks. Fertile work.
Thank you very much, Professor Michelini, for your welcome speech. I am not going to waste any time and just go on to ask Dr. Colin Calleja, the Dean from the Faculty of Education in Malta, to welcome the participants today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, I truly would like to welcome all participants in this important webinar, interesting webinar. I had the occasion of joining you for some time in the last webinar that you held, organized by Malta, and I am pleased to be here also today. The Department of Mathematics and Science Education within the Faculty of Education is very active in the promotion of science. Now they are building a complement to be able to, with the collaboration of colleagues from the Faculty of Science and others, for the popularization of science in education. And I think this is crucial in a world where we're looking at a world where we need to be able to understand it. We need to be able to understand, and we can only understand it through understanding the science behind what is happening. And I think it's very crucial, very important that science education continues to be strengthened. Otherwise, we fall behind. We are already, as Malta, seeing a reality growing where some skills are missing. And when we come to select people to certain important positions, we do not find the skills required. So education is crucial that it invests in a type of education where we question. And if science does something, it questions everything. And that's what makes a scientist. I suppose this is one of the basic requirements of a scientist, to question the phenomena that surround us. So I truly augur a good webinar today, and hopefully this will continue to help us see how we can form better teachers of science, in particular, in your case, physics educators that are able to light a true flame of curiosity in the children that we teach. In the school children, in our university and post-secondary education, we need to allow curiosity to be there and to make science truly an area that is sought after. If we lose the scientist in a community, I think we would be losing a very important component of what makes us who we are: intelligent human beings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kalea. I really agree with you that we really have to push for quality science in our schools and also in science education. I now welcome Dr. Fiona Samud, the Deputy Dean from the Faculty of Science at the University of Malta. Hello.
Hello, hello. Welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm really delighted to be here with you today and to also welcome participants from all over the world for these next 3 days, where you will be sharing thoughts and knowledge and opinions. Thank you, of course, to the speakers and also to the organizers for making this possible, even though, of course, it might have been better if this webinar, instead of a webinar, took place in Malta, of course, but hopefully next year. Yes, this is the second time that the University of Malta is collaborating to organize this event. So we are truly honored to, again, be part of this. And we are also honored to have you all with us to pursue discussions on challenges that are faced at different stages of teaching physics, issues with regards to gender gap, because we're still seeing that we need to push to have more females taking up science subjects. To be fair, in my case, I'm the head of department from the Statistics and Operations Research in the Faculty of Science. So in our case, at our level, we don't see that much of a gender gap issue, to be fair, but in science in general, yes, we still have to work a lot more to encourage more females to take up science subjects as well, and science in general. So I'm sure that you will have plenty of fruitful discussions where you will see how to develop even more skills and to encourage even more enthusiasm in the teachers themselves, and how to pass on that enthusiasm to the students. Also for them, hopefully to become our future scientists, or if they don't decide to pursue a career in science itself, but at least to have science for their love of science, and so to also pass on the love of science to others around them. So yeah, so I mean, I'm not going to take much more of your time so that you can dedicate I mean, more time to your fruitful discussions, but thank you everyone again, and all the best for these next 3 days and any future collaborations, of course.
Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samu. Thank you very much for joining us too. I think now Anthony has to say a few words about technicalities of this webinar. Anthony?
Yes, good afternoon. I extend the local organizing committee's warm greetings to the GIREP Malta Webinar 2021. For any technical questions, feel free to ask me, especially with regards to the Zoom settings. As explained in my emails, the plenary session, so where we are meeting all of us together, right? For example, right now, we are going to use the webinar, Zoom webinar. You have received an email from Zoom, you click on that one like you've done now, or every time we meet back here for the plenary, use that link. For the work group meetings that will happen in parallel, please use the Zoom links meeting, the ones that I've sent you by email. So there are 5 of them, and you have received an email. You can choose, of course, choose the one that you have opted for, but then you can also choose others if you want to just have a look what is happening on some other work group meetings. With regards to the links, I've sent the links to, we've decided to send the links to everyone who has applied, has registered. If you still have to pay for the webinar, please do so in the coming days, because at the moment we just send the link so that everyone can join and not miss the webinar, but then of course the payment can be done later. Just to remind you, today, for example, after the first keynote speaker, we will then go for the parallel sessions. So then we will get out from this meeting and you join any meeting that you prefer, the one that you have opted for. And then at 6 p.m., we'll come back here to this plenary session for the second keynote speaker. I remind you that we have to stick with our timings. So we start at 6 back for the plenary session. When I start that 6 p.m. plenary sessions, all the other meetings drop. So we meet back here again. So if you finish earlier from the work group meeting, allow some time, maybe wait for 1 minute before 6 until we start again, so that we can meet all of us together at 6 p.m. here for the plenary. So right now, sit back and enjoy the first interesting keynote speaker by Professor André GIREP. Back to you, Joan.
Yes, thank you very much, Anthony. So from what you say, at 6 sharp, everybody has to stop from the work groups, right? And go back to the webinar. I am very happy to now present Professor André GIREP, who will be conducting the first keynote speech entitled Quantum Physics for Children and Teachers. André GIREP is one of the leading physicists in Malta. He is currently head of the Department of Physics at the University of Malta. He finalized his PhD in theoretical physics from the University of Southampton in the UK. He is Associate Professor of Atomic and Quantum Physics at the University of Malta, is Science Policy Officer of the Malta Chamber of Scientists, represents Malta on several European research networks, and was recently elected as the first Maltese member of the Global Young Academy. André has an active career in science, having established and leading the Quantum Research Group at the University of Malta, and co-owns an educational software startup. So now to you, André, for your keynote speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. I think I have a lot to live up to. So I'm just going to say, I'm not used to giving talks from this room in particular. The camera's up there and it's showing how bold I'm becoming. So I cannot be called young in any sense of the word. But you know, I still like to pretend that I'm young enough to be able to speak to children on their own terms, so to speak. Listen, I appreciate the invitation, and I extend my deepest gratitude to both the local organisers and to the organisers of the GIREP webinar series, but the conferences as well, more broadly. And I'm really humbled to be in a position to speak to you today. I have taken note of Anthony's very strong recommendation to stick to time, so I'm going to try and finish before time. Also, because I think it would be interesting to, if we have some time, to open the floor to discussions or questions or whatever in any way that we can technically. I'm not familiar with Zoom webinars, but if anyone has any questions, I would love to discuss those. So please send them somehow to Anthony or to the webinar system on Zoom, because I would much rather discuss things that you want to discuss than finish all the slides or anything like that. So with that said, again, I want to extend my deepest gratitude for being here. Thank you all for giving me the time of day. And I follow a long list of distinguished introductions by very distinguished people. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to give the first keynote. I just want to echo Dr. Colin Kalea's or Professor Colin Kalea's words, and he said that we need to be able to understand the world. And I think that is one of the most insightful phrases I've heard probably all year. So thank you for bringing that up, because whether knowingly or not, it actually plays into some of what I was planning to say during this presentation. So fantastic, fantastic link over there. And I do agree with you so much about needing to understand the world and keeping curiosity alive. And I think this is something which we, as educators, I wouldn't call myself a teacher because I don't have a fraction of the experience or training as most of you. But as educators, this is something which we should definitely keep alive, the spirit of curiosity. Yes, I wanted to talk about quantum mechanics, and I understand that not everyone here has the same background as I do. If you do, I apologize for kind of not getting it right. So I thought, though, that would be good to kind of kick off with a sort of baseline understanding of what it is that I find interesting, weird, and wonderful about quantum mechanics. Because that leads me very naturally to a discussion of how quantum physics and quantum mechanics is going to influence our future technology and our future world, and how we therefore need people who are quantum natives, to co-opt a phrase that's used very often in recent times, who can speak quantum, who can understand quantum, in order to make best use of these technologies and improve our lives. And of course, it then becomes our duty as educators to figure out how to do that, how to create this generation of people. So I mean, it sounds grandiose. Hopefully, I'll chip away at these concepts and during my presentation. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get started. So I was being a bit playful with the title, of course. I don't propose that we should all go teaching quantum physics to our children, although I'm going to try that with my daughter and let you know how that works out in 18 years. But I think there are certain concepts, certain ideas which we can in very creative ways incorporate into their worldview, and I think this would be a fantastic way of having them understand more about how the world works. So first of all, what is quantum mechanics, and what is the interesting thing about it? What is the weird and wonderful world of quantum mechanics about? I like kicking this off by kind of referring to two objects, which or two classes of objects rather. And actually, Anthony, can you confirm that you're seeing the slide, please?
Can you repeat? Sorry.
Can you confirm that you're seeing the slide? Just in
Yes,
case?
yes, sure. It's football, right?
Okay, just in case. Yeah, it is football. I know nothing about football except for one thing, that it involves balls, and this is the point I'm trying to make here. We have an intuitive understanding for what particles are. We might not call them particles when we're 3 years old, but everyone knows that there are things which act very much like the football in this picture, in the sense that I can point at it and I can say, listen, the football is over there and it's moving with a certain velocity in a certain direction. And these two properties for me are the defining properties of particles. What I would call a particle is something I can assign a position and a momentum or velocity to, including direction, of course. And we, as children, we get quite an intuitive understanding for what particles are through our play and experimentation. Now, I live on an island. Not everyone has the privilege to live in a nice, tiny Mediterranean island, but many of us have been to the sea or seen swimming pools at least, or washed the dishes or something. And those who have also have a very intuitive understanding of some properties of the other end of the story, and that is waves. And in a sense, waves are the sort of the dichotomic opposite of particles. This picture is not too clear, I apologize, but it's the only one I could find from Google Earth or Google Maps, which illustrates diffraction, and it does so quite nicely, but it's not too clear. But if you have a look at there's my pointer over there. at the sort of this region over here that I'm pointing towards, we know there's a wave there. We have an intuitive understanding that the water is kind of bobbing up and down in that region. But can I point at the picture and say the wave is here or the wave is here? Well, no, I cannot. The wave is delocalized. And can I say that the wave is moving in this direction or that direction? Well, not always. Waves can be expanding, like in this picture, in several different directions at the same time. So, these are the two kind of defining properties which, for me, distinguish particles from waves. And this will come back to haunt us in a few minutes. But I just want to emphasize that in many ways, even as children, we have an intuitive understanding of the building blocks of quantum mechanics. It's just a question of putting those building blocks together where we sometimes struggle a bit. So we know what waves and particles are. Now, let me just play on the concept of waves for a second, and I'll get back to particles in a few minutes' time. Because if I were to kind of look at what's happening in this picture between the breaks in the breakwater, there is something which we know is called interference happening. So if I wanted to show a clearer picture, if I have two water waves expanding spherically, like what I showed in the picture earlier, in the region in between, we get this really nice interference pattern. And again, anyone who's thrown anything in any body of water will intuitively understand that waves do this. Waves interact with each other in this way. They might not say those exact words, but really this is what's happening, and many people have this intuitive understanding. Now, what I want you to focus on a bit is, if I ramp up the contrast in this picture by quite a bit, you'll see that there are regions where the wave is high, regions where the wave is low. You get this lovely interference pattern. And in fact, if I cut a line across that, a horizontal line, then what I will see is bright spots and dark spots in this picture. And again, I'm not saying anything outlandish. I'm not saying anything which many of us have not seen for thousands of times, probably. But as we now know, or as we've known since the 17th century, I should say, this phenomenon also takes place in other media, not just water. And in fact, I think it was it Young? Yeah, it was Young who first really gained a good understanding for a similar phenomenon which happens when I pass light through two slits at the same time. And I get this lovely interference pattern of bright and dark fringes. It might look very different, at face value, but it really is exactly the same. Sorry, there we go. It's exactly the same phenomenon expressed at very different size scales. So instead of 1 meter, we're talking about, I don't know, a fraction of a millimeter over here, a bit less than that. But ultimately, it is the same thing. And now I want to kind of take a leaf out of what Professor Kalea said, about curiosity, because if we find this phenomenon in waves, if we find this phenomenon in light, I mean water waves and light, where else could we expect to find it? And this is where I want to go back to our particles, because a particle is like a football, or a football is like a particle, depending on how you phrased it. And the question then becomes, what if I repeat this experiment with a football? So what if I have a football and I shoot a football at a wall which has two blanks, two spaces in it? And some of you might think I've had too little sleep in the past 3 months, which is correct. But that's not the reason why I'm asking such a stupid question. Of course, we know what the answer is. The football will either go through one hole or through the other hole, or of course bounce back from the wall. But nothing strange will happen. And to that I ask, why? Or rather, why not? I mean, what is there in the laws of physics that tells me that the phenomena that I observed earlier with water waves and light should not be observable here? And the answer is, we actually don't know. And this is another aspect of one of those things which I absolutely go out of my way to introduce to my students and nieces and nephews and everyone else who's around me, is this idea that science does not yet have all the answers. Science is a good way of trying to get at the answers, but it doesn't mean we have them. And there are open questions, and open questions are fantastic. It gives us things to think about and things to explore. In this case, there is an open question. Actually, science does not yet have a good answer for this. We do not yet have a good answer for why this football would not undergo the exact same interference phenomenon. And in fact, if I shrink everything down by a factor of about, I want to say about 1 million, or maybe a bit more than that, and I replace that football with a buckyball, a ball made out of 50 carbon atoms, then what happens? And actually, what happens if you send a buckyball through a double slit is you will see an interference pattern. And now this starts messing with our notion of what is a particle and what is a wave, because on the one hand I can point at that buckyball, I can say it's there, I can point, I can give it a velocity, but on the other hand, if I pass it through this apparatus, it's coming out behaving like a wave. And we can discuss this, and I'm happy to talk about this for days and days and days. I'm not going to do that because I will be shouted at by Anthony fairly soon. But the point is that this is how the universe behaves. And it is extremely interesting and important to try and understand why it behaves like that. But understanding why it behaves like that is not a precondition to using these phenomena and building on top of them. Once we understand, or once we accept that the universe works like this, then the next question is, so what? What can we do with it? And this is what I want to try and play at in the next few minutes. Incidentally, this kind of dichotomy between small and large behaving differently is the sort of paradigmatic Schrodinger's cat. That is to say, if I have a single atom, and a single atom is small enough that we can understand it can behave weirdly, and a single atom can be in two places or two states at the same time. Our brain is okay with that to an extent. Then if the single atom is in one state or one place, the cat lives. If it is in the other state or place, the cat dies. Cats are not things which we are usually used to thinking of being in two places at the same time, or being in two different states at the same time. But the laws of physics seem to imply that if the atom is in two states at the same time, then a cat will be in two states at the same time. And again, this is what the laws of physics do imply. And again, we don't have an answer for why we don't see this in practice. So this is something which invokes lots of debate in class, I can assure you. But it's also something which you can discuss with quite young children and start to get a better sense for what it actually means, because sometimes they say the most insightful things because they're not encumbered by our preconceptions. In any case, this is how quantum mechanics paints a picture of the universe. So the question becomes now, how can we use this weird picture of the universe to do interesting things? Might sound like a strange question, but let me, bear with me for a second. If I show you a picture of a massive steam locomotive, or I think this is a steam locomotive. In any case, it's something powered by steam, and it's something old. You might say, well, that's clearly not quantum mechanical, and I would have to agree with you on that. But we know that, for example, the efficiency of all of these kinds of objects, that's governed by Carnot's law under the right condition. So one can then ask the question, what if I shrink this engine down to a microscopic scale and I endow it with the properties of quantum mechanics? Would it somehow be more efficient or behave better in some sense? And this is the question that we're trying to answer in our world as researchers. But it's also one of those questions that is starting to seriously impact how we view future technologies as coming on board. Because yes, whilst talking about a quantum steam locomotive sounds cool, but it's a bit of a crazy idea, there are other aspects where we do have quantum technologies which are much closer to the horizon. And the one big thing is quantum computing. This is on everyone's, it's on the media's agenda. We hear about it a lot. And just to give a sense for kind of how things have improved over the past several decades. I mean, this is a picture of one of the landmark computers. Don't ask me because I genuinely don't know which one. from the 40s or early 50s, if I remember correctly. But you know, it is a big, massive object. It's a miracle of engineering, but it's got about 1/1,000,000th of the computing power of my phone. So yeah, things have advanced quite a bit. And in fact, computers nowadays don't look like this. They look a lot like, you know, a little silicon city with just the right components on board. Yes, these devices are smaller, more efficient, and you know, millions of times faster than that behemoth which I just showed. But they are still now reaching a boundary. We can sometimes call it Moore's law, we can call it the laws of thermodynamics, you know, many things, but we are reaching a boundary to how fast and how good we can make these devices. And we're looking for the next step forward in computation, and enter quantum computers. Now, as an aside, many people, if you Google quantum computer, you'll find images just like this one, which look impressive, but actually this is the fridge that houses the quantum computer. There's yeah, this is just a very expensive and very, very, very impressive fridge, but it is just a fridge. The quantum computer would actually be a small, tiny, tiny chip at the bottom of this, which looks a lot like one of these. This is a picture of, I think, one of Google's early prototypes. Google are now a lot better manufacturing these devices than they used to be. This has four, you can see that there's 4 quadrants there. It's got 4 quantum bits, 4 bits. Now, this is the point. These devices have quantum bits, qubits. And what are quantum bits? What are qubits? Well, they're a lot like the bits that make up computers, but we endow them with quantum properties. So our computers, and computer scientists or anyone who knows any computing will probably be very, very angry at me. But computers are basically glorified boxes full of switches. You know, trillions of switches, but they are switches. You know, a transistor is basically a switch at the end of the day. And that is what a computer is, you know, in its most basic form. Now, what we can do is we can create not just a switch, but a quantum switch. And a quantum switch can be in 2 different states at the same time. So a switch can be on or off. A quantum switch can be on and off at the same time. And this device here has 4 quantum switches, each of which can be on and off. And you know, you can start understanding how the complexity of the device increases quite dramatically, because even a single device, we can no longer describe it as on or off. We must be able to describe everything in between, which intuitively sounds like a lot harder, let alone 4, 8, 16, 1,000 of these quantum switches. And you might question, you know, what can I do with these? Are these things useful at all? And just to give you a sense of how these things are useful, how these quantum bits and quantum computers are useful, let me just kind of illustrate a very, very abstract idea. Let's say I have a black box. This black box, it has a computer. I press a switch, so I switch on or off. That's my input. It's a switch which goes on or off on one side. And on the other side, I have an LED which lights or doesn't light. So I have 2 inputs and 2 outputs, or so 2 possible inputs or 2 possible outputs. And my question is, what does this box do? So if I have the switch off, does it light up? If I have the switch on, does it light up? Yes or no? And the only way we can understand how this box works, or you know, not how this box works, but the only way we can understand the effect of this box on the input is to observe it with the switch off, observe it with the switch on, and just take note of that. So for one switch, we need to run the experiment twice. And you can immediately see that for 2 switches, we need to do it 4 times, for 8 switches, sorry, for 3 switches, 8 times, and so on. And the whole thing blows up exponentially. Now, it turns out that if we had a quantum box, quantum computer, and the input and output were quantum bits, qubits, instead of bits, then we would actually be able to, and there's an algorithm that allows us to do this, we would actually be able to conduct this entire experiment in one go. Okay, so it is a question which cannot be answered with our ordinary technology, with our ordinary computers in one go, but simply by endowing the system with these quantum properties, allowing the things to be in 2 places or 2 states at the same time, we can use that, what we call superposition, to do many things at the same time. So I hope that you have more of an appreciation for the fact that quantum computers actually do have potential purposes. Although at this stage, one could regard them a bit differently. So I don't know how much you know about the history of the laser, but back in the 60s, when the lasers were first demonstrated, they were called a solution looking for a problem. People realized they had something really good on their hands. They had just had no idea what it was good for, other than basic science experiments. And it took a while, but nowadays without lasers, we wouldn't have this. We wouldn't have broadband internet. We wouldn't have 100,000 different things. We wouldn't have lithography working at a certain scale and so on. Basically, our modern technology cannot exist without lasers. So, in 60 years, it is a long time, I admit, but in 60 years or 50 years, we've gone from a solution looking for a problem to a solution for almost every problem. So I hope that despite being not too detailed about the purposes of quantum technologies, that you regard them with, yes, healthy skepticism, but still, not as solutions looking for a problem, because there are specific problems which we know we can apply them to if only we could build them. And let's look at a couple of problems. One is actually a very bad thing to do. The other would be a good thing. But I like showing both sides of the equation, so to speak. And one is breaking the internet or breaking security. So it turns out that any country or entity or person with a large-scale quantum computer would basically ruin all of our lives, because they would be able to break the security algorithms which currently keep our information secure on the internet and on our computers and everywhere. Of course, things are a bit overblown in these headlines, but headlines have a habit of doing that. But I just want to illustrate just how big of a paradigm shift these computers will bring, which goes on to play in the hands of why we need to train people to think things like this. Okay, so I'm not losing light of that goal, but I want to give a sense for how much of a revolution these things will bring. So let's say you and I want to communicate securely, and this could be a Zoom call, which is encrypted. It could be me sending my credit card information to Amazon, anything. Then we need to agree on a way to do this. But broadly speaking, we need a key, a mathematical object, a number at the end of the day, that allows you to scramble your message, send it to me in scrambled form in a way that people cannot intercept or reverse engineer, and then I can use my key, my mathematical number digit, to unscramble the message and read what he sent me, which all sounds well and good. Now, the problem is, how do you set this up? And actually, setting this up is a very fascinating mathematical challenge. And the best solution we have found nowadays is to use massive numbers that are products of two very big prime numbers. Now, this is what keeps the internet secure. It is the fact that if I gave you a big number, factorizing is really, really, really hard. It would take longer than the age of the universe, on average, to factorize a number that keeps this Zoom call secure. So, for all intents and purposes, we can keep it secure against any computer that we have nowadays. But there are algorithms which work only on quantum computers. There's the famous Shor algorithm over there, which bring that age of the universe down to about a year. I cannot overstate just how much of a big difference this is. It's 14 orders of magnitude, give or take, in computational speed. And these are not things which are science fiction. I showed a picture of a prototypical quantum computer earlier. These are things which will be, maybe not in our children's hands because they're still too big to shrink down to that level, but they will be at our children's metaphoric fingertips. I'm convinced of this. So this is one aspect where quantum computers will give us, or give whoever holds them, infinite power on the internet, so to speak. There is another flip side to this, which is perhaps a bit more of a positive outcome, and that is, say I was looking for a needle in a haystack, so to speak, a digital needle in a digital haystack. then this is a very difficult challenge. And Sergey Brin and all the others at Google made their billions by finding out better ways of solving this problem approximately on an ordinary computer. Quantum computers can do this a lot faster. So again, we have situations like drug design, like protein folding and and enzyme design, which would benefit enormously, untellingly, from having a full general purpose quantum computer. So these devices, which exploit the laws of nature in a way which we don't do at the moment, stand to really benefit humanity. And this is why you have IBM building its own quantum development software. We have Microsoft having an Azure Quantum. All these tech giants. Amazon has AWS Quantum, or however it's calling it nowadays. Intel has a program. Honeywell has a program. All the tech giants are now investing very heavily in developing this technology, because on the one hand, they're scared of not being the first. On the other hand, though, they really do see a massive, the massive implications that these new technologies will bring with them. So the question now becomes, how do we program a quantum computer? How do we think about that? Because simply saying, well, I have a bit which is on or off, and I change it to a bit which can be on and off, it doesn't capture a fraction of what's going on. It doesn't capture a fraction of the physics underlying it. It doesn't capture a fraction of the complexity theory going on. And here we find a very interesting confluence of fields where physicists have a grasp, more or less, of what's going on, but they have no idea how to program ordinary computers, let alone quantum computers. Computer scientists have a very good idea of how to program and play with ordinary computers, and physicists try to explain physics to the computer scientists, who then build languages which include some effects, some thoughts of quantum physics in a way which computer scientists understand. But honestly, these are not, sort of quantum native languages. And there is a very, very interesting development coming in the intersection of these two fields, which is fascinating, and I'd happily discuss what's going on there with anyone as we go along. But the point is, we need to revisit the very concept of how we build a computer, how we think about circuitry, how we think about algorithms, everything from the ground up. And yes, we can dress quantum algorithms up in a way as to look like an ordinary algorithm. I can't remember which particular language this is. I think there's another example from IBM's language, which really dresses up a quantum computer in the language of ordinary computers. But we will never be able to realize the full power of these technologies without going a step further. And I'm talking about it in terms of the power of technology, but ultimately it goes hand in hand with understanding nature, because these technologies exploit some very, very, very fundamental properties of nature. So one cannot divorce the exploitation of the technological effects from understanding nature better. This is what keeps me really happy as a quantum scientist, because I can claim to do fundamental science that has technological implications. And I think this is absolutely fascinating. So how do we approach, or how should we approach this problem, according to me? Or what things can we do? Well, as anyone with a toddler can tell you, it is exasperating at 8 p.m. picking up for the nth time all the toys which they threw on the floor. And you could call this them being mischievous. You could call this them figuring out the optimal way in which to annoy their parents, which is an interesting approach from a computer science perspective, I would say. But beyond this, I would say they are basically learning Newton's laws of motion. They're throwing things and seeing where they land. They're throwing something and seeing that it bounces for so many times before it stops. That if I throw something, there is an up and a down, and things tend to go down. That if I throw something, it doesn't just spontaneously disappear, but the same thing that I threw lands over there. And if I pick it up and throw it back down, the same thing is going to happen. These are Newton's laws of motion. There's nothing else. And this is part of the childlike curiosity, which many educational systems, let's not point fingers, but many educational systems do a fantastic job at killing. You know, this concept of staying curious and just breaking things or moving things around and seeing what happens. Now, one could argue that it is very difficult to do this on the scale of a class. I can buy that argument. One could argue that you know, our classrooms or our teaching systems are simply not made that way. You know, this is a whole argument that I am not in the slightest qualified to enter. Happy to discuss my opinion, but you know, it's not my it's not my field of expertise. But I would say that if we could give our children a way in which they can mess about with the universe in a broad sense, then they might get a better understanding, not just of the ordinary laws of motion and, you know, other things, but also of how the universe actually works at the most fundamental level as quantum mechanics. And just to give a brief, just to do a brief detour. So something I was involved in over the past few years. On the top right picture, there's Danielle, who is a fantastic science communicator. I think she's in the audience right now, but she is absolutely second to none. In any case, so Danielle, I, and a few other people, we were working on a project which put together a game which I can't remember. I think it's 8 puzzles. So a game of 8 puzzles, each pair of which corresponds to a specific section in the syllabus, in the physics syllabus for children ages 7 to 9, if I remember correctly. So in the left picture over there, we're looking at a teacher in this case playing a game which has got to do with shadows. So in this specific case, one of the learning outcomes is that shadows or light travels in straight lines, forming shadows, basically. Now you can say light travels in straight lines and form shadows, which you know, is probably internalized by 1% of children. You can give children torches and things like that, and I encourage everyone to do that. But you know, it is not feasible in every circumstance, and it's not feasible at the level of very large classes and so on. It's also, you know, messy, and you know, it's okay with torches, but what about things which could be dangerous, for example? So you know, there are some questions about kind of expanding this perspective. So our philosophy was, what if we gave children a virtual world in which they can mess about? So the laws of physics are encoded in this game. You know, they can move the source of light around, and the shadows will respond appropriately. But they don't know that they're learning, because the objective of the game is to guide a penguin from one place to another on that screen, and the penguin can only go where the light shines, you know, and things like that. So you have to get a sense of an understanding of how shadows form and how light works, without being formally taught this. So this kind of learning by doing, or learning by experimentation, turned digital. I understand it's a poor cousin of doing it in the real world, but for many purposes, this is the only possibility, or the better possibility. And in fact, we kind of inserted an interesting 9th puzzle in there, which was sponsored by another project I was working on, HOT, which talks about how light doesn't just illuminate things or form shadows. Light actually pushes things, you know, what we call radiation pressure. This is something that no school I know teaches, at least at this level. But we thought, well, you know, we can quite easily incorporate these concepts into a game and have children shoot light at a trapdoor and try and open it. You know, it sounds almost too basic once you think about it. But once you have given children the ability to mess about with it in this way, then they start internalizing these concepts and start thinking about ways in which they can use them or abuse them. But you know, you inspire this curiosity. Those of you who are running Android, please feel free to download the game. You can just click on that QR. Oh, not click. You can scan that QR code, and it takes you straight to our Google to our app on our Google Play Store. I encourage you to do that. It's a fun way to kill some time and learn about physics while doing it, which is a win-win from my perspective. Now, we can, and this is my closing sort of thesis, we should extend this concept into things which we don't ordinarily see. One could argue that, yes, it's not easy for children to move torches and light sources around in the real world for various reasons. So let's give them a game that allows them to do that. But those are still things that everyone can see around them. So let's do things, let's give them tools that they cannot see around them. And we're starting to see a kind of a movement where, for example, IBM is building a game which echoes Minecraft, which is a very popular game for those of you who don't have young relations, echoes Minecraft, but where the laws of quantum mechanics reply, so they can, children can mess about with the laws of quantum mechanics. There's also something called QCraft, which is actually a Minecraft add-on with quantum physics built in. And my argument is that this is the way in which we can start giving our youngest children some understanding of the fact that the world doesn't always work at the level that you see, but there are sometimes levels beneath that. So let's bring those levels to the surface, even if it's not possible in reality, to try and get a sense of understanding, a sense of intuition. And I'm not arguing that we should teach quantum physics to our babies. I reserve the right to do that as a quantum physicist. I'm not arguing we should do that, but I think that conceptually, there is a massive repertoire of tools that we now have accessible to us, which can allow us to start teaching without teaching very deep concepts of physics. And this is the only way in which we can grow generations of people who can go beyond the surface level intuition that we have and start thinking about the world in completely different ways. In a sense, thinking about the world as it really is. So with that, I think I'm a few minutes early. So Anthony put a nice star next to my name. I thank you for your attention. Those are my coordinates. Please get in touch. I enjoy interesting discussions on this and other topics. And I'm happy to take any questions for the next 5 minutes, or we can use this as a break to move to the next speaker. Please guide me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It seems that Anthony is still muted, so I'll say thank you very much to Professor Andrei GIREP. It was a very inspiring talk, taking us from the very basics of physics and leading us to this idea of quantum mechanics and this liberation of our children's imagination. That's very important. Thank you so much. Now we ask the floor for questions, if there are any.
May I just comment that for any questions, you can either raise your hand and and then I will give you permissions to talk, or else you can simply write in the chat.
I think Marisa wanted to ask something or say something.
Yes. Can I?
Yes, of course. Go on.
Many thanks for your exciting suggestions. I want to make questions. First of all, do you believe that is more important the fantasy or rules? I will explain better. We as physicists are very often selecting a section of the reality and to create models which are working with some sort of rules, and these models are able to describe a large amount of reality. Different contexts sometimes are able to be described by the same formal model or the same rules. We can speak on rules for what concerns children. So I learned by Vygotsky and by Battesard and other pedagogists that children to learn and to grow are often playing by using rules and inventing rules. For example, children, when are on the sand, will consider a piece of sand like a cake, another piece of sand like a plate or something like that. So rules are needed by children. And a pedagogist tell us that the way in which children are thinking are very abstract and are not so concrete as we believe, and the way in which they are able to overcome the distinction between the reality and models, or what they believe are only the rules of the play, is the way in which they are growing and they are applying modern states of simple rules for play. And so I am impressed of such a sort of possibilities of children. And I believe really that we can use rules for children. And I try to do that. So if I can continue just 1 minute, I try to do that. There is a very nice game, which is Couple Learn in quantum mechanics, which is developed in Finland. And thanking to our friends developing this system, I try to use the system with students. And I want to see if they are learning better by means of the games or by means of a fundamental course of quantum mechanics. And I have not the answer because, because in fact, the familiarity of student in using Couple Learn, in using such a sort of quantum mechanics games, is very, very better than those in which the other student, after a long course in physics, in quantum mechanics, are able to do. So I ask your suggestion because you are touching two very, very important points. One is rules and the way in which abstract rules, like for physicists, of course, can be used to learn the way in which quantum mechanics is set up on one side, and the other side is what I ask you, the physical meaning. The physical meaning is much more related to the interpretations of rules or math and the way in which we are looking to that. And so is what you call, if I have good understood, creativity, fantasy, and so on. So I want your comment about that because you stimulate a lot of questions in my mind.
Thank you so much for this. And as I said, I'm not a pedagogist by training, definitely. So it's interesting seeing things which I try and grasp intuitively, said more formally. It is a very interesting debate, and I honestly don't, obviously, I don't have an answer to this. But if I were to hazard an answer, at least to try and explain what I have in my mind as to how we can approach getting to an answer. I'm going to use your sandcastle analogy because I like that. It's remarkably physics agnostic in this sense, and the point is the following: the rules in this sense say, I don't know, you fill the bucket with the sand, you put some water in it so it's damp, so it sticks together. Then you tap the bucket, and you lift the bucket, and it's there. Of course, as you said, it could be a castle, it could be a cake, it could be, you can make a mermaid out of it, whatever it is. And for me, this kind of illustrates both sides of the equation, because there are the rules of how to build that, how to construct the model, but then what you apply the model to, that's where I would say, let go of the brakes, let go of the rules. So I would say, yes, the model, the rules, that's how children learn. I understand that when I think I see that in the children around me. But I would say let us make it apparent at a very young age that those rules can be questioned. They are often incomplete. And sometimes there's just no reason why we apply those rules to one thing and not to another. So why don't you try and do that and see what happens? So I would say both are important, but again, I'm not a pedagogist, so please take what I say with a pinch of salt here. Thank you.
Are there any more questions, please?
And I think we're over time. Anthony is starting to look at me.
There have been some comments as well on the chat.
Yeah, actually, okay. So since you pointed me to the chat, I'm just going to say one thing. Russell Mitzi said that I think it was Feynman. Yes, Feynman. One of his lectures said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the quote in front of me, but it is the quote I used to kick off my quantum mechanics lectures. And he said that at one point there were maybe a dozen people who understood relativity. Once they caught on, and kind of wrote the papers, then everyone else started understanding relativity. On the other hand, nobody understands quantum mechanics. And people often take this to mean that, quantum mechanics is too difficult for us to understand. This is actually completely wrong and really, really damaging pedagogically. But Feynman was Feynman. Feynman was being very incisive on purpose. What he actually meant, if you read between the lines and what goes on in the conversation after that, was that this is still true today as it was in 57 when he wrote it. I think it was 57. We still do not understand why the universe works like this. So if you were to ask me, do you understand quantum mechanics in the sense of why quantum mechanics is what it is? No. Absolutely not. And I don't think anyone ever will until we have children who, we grow a generation of children who speak quantum, so to speak. Relativity is different. Relativity is something we can grasp intuitively. Okay, lengths change, times change. That's it. These are concepts we can grasp. Quantum mechanics is different. And honestly, people like me were very pragmatic. We stop asking why. We just go ahead. Feynman also said, shut up and calculate. That's the philosophy that many of us take. So I just want to say that the quote is a bit more nuanced than it might seem at first. And just to speak to Danielle's comment, I do appreciate as well Marisa's connection. I mean, this is something I need to get a better answer for, whether I favor fantasy or rules. I would prefer fantasy, but I agree with you. Rules are important as well. So that's basically it from my end, and I think I'm going to shut up now and mute myself.
Thank you very much. We really enjoyed listening to your talk and also the discussions. If anybody would like to contact you, I suppose they can either email you or contact us, and we can forward their questions. Thank you very much. So what next, Anthony?
Yes, so we now will stop from this plenary session, from the webinar, and we'll move on to the parallel sessions, the work group meetings. You can end this, you can get out from this webinar, follow the email that I've sent you with the 5 links, choose the work group meeting right for you, and you can start the work group discussions there. At 6, or let's say 1 or 2 minutes before 6, make sure you close everything and meet us all here again at the plenary session in the webinar. Okay, good luck.